Get Up Nation. My name is Ben Biddick. I am the creator and host of the Get Up Nation podcast, where I serve individuals, organizations, and societies to develop and sustain resilience and perseverance. I'm the co-author of Get Up, The Art of Perseverance, with former Major League Baseball player and CEO of Luron Living, Adam Greenberg. The Get Up Nation podcast is brought to you in partnership with GotYourSixCoffee.com, where Navy veteran Eric Hadley is committed to serving first responders, veterans, and their families through a variety of nonprofit organizations. No stranger to adversity, Eric has fused necessity of coffee with his passion for public service. You're already purchasing coffee. Why not empower your coffee with purpose? Why not purchase coffee that not only has your six, but also has the backs of those who don a uniform of service for our communities and great country? Learn more about Eric and his freshly roasted, award-winning coffee at GotYourSixCoffee.com. Welcome to this episode of the Get Up Nation podcast. Recently, I had the honor and privilege of speaking with Dr. Michael Lewis. He's one of America's most trusted physicians. He retired from the United States Army at the rank of colonel and served our country for over 31 years. He's advised countless professional athletes, top-ranking military officials, and senior executives at the Department of Defense and the U.S. government on brain optimization. He is the best-selling book author of When Brains Collide, What Every Athlete and Parent Should Know About the Prevention and Treatment of Concussions and Brain Injuries. He is an internationally renowned physician, researcher, and speaker on brain health. He is also the founder of the 501c3 nonprofit Brain Health Education and Research Institute, dedicated to helping patients with traumatic brain injuries recover as quickly and fully as possible. He joins Get Up Nation today to share how we can optimize our brain health. Dr. Lewis, thank you for joining me on the Get Up Nation show.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Ben.
All right. Dr. Lewis, honored to have some time with you today to share with Get Up Nation your knowledge and insight into brain health. Will you share what led to your interest in this field and why you've made it your life's work?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I'm a board-certified physician in preventive medicine, and I was doing infectious disease work in Southeast Asia. I was a disease hunter, and the Army said, you got all this great experience, come back and teach students at the medical school in Bethesda, Maryland. And now we got Iraq and Afghanistan going on. This is 15 plus years ago. And we've got these wars going on. And you can't be on the campus of Walter Reed without being around wounded warriors. So you start to think, what can I do to help soldiers that are coming back with these sometimes injuries, missing limbs, and sometimes injuries you can't see, like traumatic brain injury. And had one general officer friend of mine say, well, what are you doing about these traumatic brain injuries? You're a doctor. And I was doing infectious disease work, nothing even related. But I kind of put two and two together, came up with an odd number, and went to the head of research at Walter Reed and asked, is anybody looking at the use of omega-3 fatty acids like you would get from fish oil to help our soldiers with recover from traumatic brain injury? And he thought about it for a second, and his answer was, no, why don't you? As I didn't know anything about it, but he goes, well, you're the only one asking the question. And so that was literally a career-changing moment, and I started to dig into it and found out not many people are talking about it, especially at that time. Nobody knew anything about it. There was about 3 or 4 people in the world that I could find that knew anything about using omega-3s to help the brain recover from injury. So as I say, that's the rest of the story.
Yeah, and certainly with the type of warfare that has been experienced by men and women of the armed forces in Iraq and Afghanistan, consisting of injuries sustained from roadside bombs detonating in and around their vehicles or as they're on patrol, your expertise is vital to helping them heal from these injuries. Will you share a little bit about where that conversation took you? What came next as you sought to serve these wounded warriors?
Well, one of the people that I sought out to find out what, who knew anything about omega-3s in the brain was a psychiatrist at the National Institutes of Health. And he lived nearby, and we were getting to know each other, or I think we were out having a beer one night or something. And now his focus is on omega-3s and mental health, and particularly he was looking at suicide at the time. And he said to me, well, if we could just draw blood on people before they commit suicide, we could answer a lot of questions. And I was like, oh, geez, that's and he's like, that's impossible. And I'm like, no, that's easy. Because turns out that the military's got 50 or more million blood specimens sitting in a freezer in Silver Spring, Maryland, with all of the DoD data behind it. And so, like, oh, how many you need? And so we put together a study and looked at getting these blood samples and looking at what their omega 3 levels were in documented suicides. And what we figured out was there was a 62% increased risk of suicide if you had low omega 3 levels in your blood. And it's huge. I mean, we looked at data, we looked at mental health visits, we looked at all kinds of things. And even if your best friend was killed in the foxhole next to you, that was only a 52% increased risk. So here was a nutritional factor that had a 62% increased risk of suicide, and something that is easily measured and could be changed for pennies a day.
Wow. So tell me, so you came up with the omega-3 protocol, is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you share with me what that is?
Well, as I was getting into this research, people all of a sudden started to ask me, my brother, my cousin, my father, my uncle, whoever, had a concussion, and how much fish oil should he take? And what really put it into perspective to me was my younger brother had a concussion and called me up with that basic question. And so I kind of almost made it up on the spot. And so basically what I said, well, take this dose, but take it 3 times a day and for a week, and let's see how that goes. And that dose is what turns out that it's what the FDA tells us is generally recognized as safe, or GRAS level of omega 3s, which was 3,000 milligrams of the combined amount of EPA and DHA, the two main omega 3s. So back then it was 5 or 6 capsules. Now with new technology and manufacturing, it's really, you can do that in just 3 capsules per dose. So I look at the Omega protocol is basically 3,000 milligrams 3 times a day for a couple of days, at least a week. In some cases, with some patients that have been struggling for years, I will typically do maybe even a month at that level. But I look at that as a loading dose. I want to get them down to that generally recognized as safe level as soon as possible. I don't want people to be on these really well, I don't call them really high doses, but most people think they are. But I don't want them to be on that higher dose for too long. I want to get them down to sort of a normal dose after we correct that deficiency in omega 3s.
Amazing. Okay. And let's see. So this is revolutionizing things. You've also put out some information about how CBD is helping people with TBI. Will you go into what successful treatment regimens are and what progress you're seeing happen and how people's lives are being impacted?
So I started on this omega 3 idea about 13 or 14 years ago now. Oh, time flies when you're having fun. And about 5 years or so ago, I had retired from the military, and I had a friend of mine in the fish oil industry who went over to the CBD industry. He says, you really got to take a look at this stuff. And so I started to look into it, and then basically gave me some product to try with some patients, and just started to see a great response. So using it in addition to omega 3s, and it found it really is helpful for anxiety more than anything. It can help decrease headaches and chronic pain. But with my head injury, my concussion patients, I found that it really helped with the anxiety. And I would get comments back like, hey, that fish oil is great, but that CBD has been life changing. And I was like, geez, I must be onto something here. And more recently, I've been trying to get down into the scientific, biochemical level to figure out what's going on. And it turns out there's this great interaction between omega 3s and CBD. And essentially, CBD blocks one of the enzymes that keeps the omega 3s from getting broken down. And so it really potentiates the ability of the brain to grow new brain cells and make new synapses and new connections between the brain cells.
Amazing. Now, for those who are not familiar with what happens when a person sustains a significant brain injury, will you share how the human body responds to this trauma and what generally follows as far as symptoms after the injury?
Well, it's winter time, so if you think about you slip on the ice and your feet go flying, you hit your head on the pavement, and your skull comes to a quick stop, obviously, but your brain is a little bit of a lag time behind it because it's inside the skull in this bath of fluid, and so it's going to come to a sudden stop when it hits the inside of your skull, causing a bruising or a contusion. And it could be so serious you get knocked out, it could even kill you. But assuming that it's not enough to be like major, damage, bleeding, and so on, it basically disrupts some of the functions of the brain from that rapid shock or that bruising. But and people think, okay, well, I saw stars, or I don't remember it. That the incident that was the concussion, but that's unfortunately just the beginning, because the body responds by setting off these biochemical cascades that can continue to burn and churn through the brain for minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, even decades. If you think about like Muhammad Ali taking punches as a young man, and how he ended up later in life with Parkinson's and eventually dying from it. That was the result of being hit in the head. That's the body reacts to trauma with inflammation to try to repair things. Well, inflammation is important and inflammation is vital to life, but we have to be able to resolve that inflammation. And so my theory that I started to work with was we're doing that inflammation okay, but because our nutritional status is so out of whack, we're never resolving that inflammation. And that, in fact, appears to be what's going on. I'm starting to read in the literature a lot more now that a lot of these brain health issues, whether it's mental health and ADHD or whether it's as a result of concussions, it's really being driven by inflammation and, more importantly, not resolving that inflammation, which is exactly what omega 3s and CBD do.
I see. Let's talk about your best-selling book called When Brains Collide, What Every Athlete and Parent Should Know About the Prevention and Treatment of Concussions and Brain Injuries. Why did you write the book, and who needs to read this book today?
Well, I wrote the book as a way to get all this information out in a most efficient way possible. I started giving talks at medical conferences and expos around the country and around the world. And I found that the same questions would come up over and over, and there's never enough time, even on an hour long radio show. There's never enough time to go into as much detail as you want. And so I kept getting asked, I literally hundreds of times, like, when are you going to put this into a book? So I finally did, but it was interesting because I worked with a writer to help me, and when I was working through that, it's like, they were like, all right, we're going to set you up with a scientific writer. And I'm like, no, I don't want a scientific writer. I want a soccer mom that I have to, and they're like, oh, why? And I was like, because I want to be able to explain it, because that's who my audience is. That mom out there that's worried about their 15-year-old daughter playing high school soccer, or their 17-year-old, running back on the football team, or their ice hockey player, and so on. So really, that's the audience of who I'm trying to reach, is just that average athlete or parent out there that's concerned. What can they do for their child or themselves, their brain health in general? Are there ways to prevent concussions, or at least put risk or odds in your favor to decrease that risk? And that's exactly what I try to spell out in the book. And again, it's really written for that average soccer mom out there that's looking for answers.
All right. Will you share some of your perspective on how people who have an increased risk of sustaining a concussion or a brain injury, like athletes, military members, what can they do to be proactive beforehand, before they go into combat or take the field? What can they do to be proactive about their brain health?
Well, I'm a huge fan of sports and particularly team sports and even more so collision sports. I mean, I grew up playing football. I played football my freshman year in college before I switched over to something even more fun, rugby. Certainly a collision sport there. And my son grew up playing soccer and football. He was the leading running back for the high school football team, and now he's a couple years, 2 years into college playing rugby at the college level. And so this is really important to me. I'm not just saying, hey, soccer moms, this is what you should do. This is literally what I have been doing and do with my son is I wouldn't let him leave the breakfast table without taking that 3,000 milligram dose official every single day. And he got through as the leading rusher for 3 years in a row on the football team at the high school level, all county kind of accolades and such, and never had a concussion because I put odds in his favor. I dealt with it from the inside out. Helmets are important and they're getting better, but they're never going to completely eliminate the risk of concussions. I dealt with it not just from the outside, the equipment side of things, but also how do you deal with it? How do you make the brain more resilient and to potentially withstand injury? And if an injury does occur, you've got the right amount of omega 3s already there to balance that inflammation and help resolve it.
I think a lot about professional athletes today. I was thinking of Adam Greenberg when he was struck with a baseball at 92 miles an hour under his helmet, actually struck him right on the head under the helmet. And I think of all the advancements that are being made with headgear in professional sports. The NFL football players have modified helmets now. Certainly in the military, the Kevlar helmets that are worn have advanced in technology and over time immensely. What are you seeing out there as far as these advancements, and what success stories are being told about protecting our brains when we go into these high contact sports or when we go into combat? What are you seeing as positives in the advancement?
From a nutrition side of things, look at the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Tom Brady, Drew Brees. They're absolute fanatics about their nutrition. And so a lot of that has to deal with not just, eating clean, healthy, but also the amount of omega 3s that they're consuming. They're more of a Mediterranean style type of diet where it's high in seafood, and that's the best source of omega 3s. And also decreasing the vegetable oils. I was just reading a study actually just this morning that came out of UC Riverside, I think it was, University of California, Riverside, about the absolute terrible damage that soybean oil does on the body and the brain in particular. And, soybeans in everything. It's what we use to process foods to keep it shelf stable.
As you know, at Get Up Nation, we focus heavily on serving individuals, organizations, and societies to develop and sustain resilience. Brain health is a vital component of our ability to be resilient. When you think of resilience, what perspective do you have to help us understand how we can maximize our brain health throughout our lives?
Well, omega 3s are important. Not you have to have omega 3s just to even make a brain in the first place. And so they're important throughout life. So important that 100% of infant formula in the United States has omega 3s added to it. And if you kind of look later in life, all right, we know that omega 3s are good for the heart, decrease the risk of heart attacks and heart disease. And then even later in life, how they can impact on the potential for dementia. There's some studies that have that come out over the years that show, well, omega 3s didn't really help with Alzheimer's, for example. Well, two things. One is typically it's too late because Alzheimer's is a disease that develops over decades. So it's, once you have the symptoms, you're way behind the curve. And number two is you got to use bigger doses to overcome the problems that we have with just our basic nutrition.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on dementia there. 16 million Americans suffer from Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. And the numbers are going up, expected to triple by 2050. The amount of cost it takes to care for someone who goes through this tremendously debilitating disease, it just is so hard on caregivers. So to know that, something as simple as taking an omega-3 regularly throughout our early life, hopefully that, can prevent some of that suffering. So I really appreciate you touching on dementia when it comes to this.
Alzheimer's is a big concern, and it's growing.
You have profound expertise on concussions, traumatic brain injury. You founded the nonprofit Brain Health Education and Research Institute in 2011 and regularly share your expertise on CNN's Sanjay Gupta show and many other media outlets. When you first entered this field, what progress, as you look back over this field and you see the progress that's been made during your career, where do you see it going in the future? And what are you excited about when it comes to brain health and the advancement of technology and science?
I would like to say that the one biggest at the time 2-3 years ago became a very huge obstacle, and then about a year or so was overcome, is the NCAA, that oversees college athletics. And they basically came out about 3 years ago and said that omega-3s and fish oil supplements are not authorized to be used by athletes. But yet so many athletic programs and colleges were using it based on a lot on the science that I've put out and the work that I've done. And so they really fought back against it. And about a year ago, the NCAA came out and basically overturned their own decision. And, so now at the training tables to help athletes maintain their weight and, with protein supplements and of course, electrolytes and carbohydrates like Gatorade, they were missing the entire story of fat. If you're needing more calories, fat's a great source for that, but good fats. So they actually have authorized the universities to buy omega-3 fish oil and provide it to their athletes. And not only that, when they came out with that pronouncement, they said very specifically that they recognize its importance for brain health of developing, at 18, 19, 20 years old, your brain's still developing. And so they recognize the importance of that. And so that's been really, really, I think, a big win. As far as the future, I think that hemp-derived CBD is really the next big area that it's a tidal wave that's growing, and I think that that's going to continue to grow because it's being recognized for athletic recovery as well as its ability to help deal with inflammation and help with brain health.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with Get Up Nation from your perspective, how we can be resilient, how we can give that gift to our children, and how we can sustain resilience throughout our entire life?
Well, the biggest thing is what they call lifestyle medicine, which is really a fancy way of saying diet and exercise. Exercise on a regular basis, a couple of times a week, if not every day. Even doing 15, 20 minutes a day is better than trying to exercise just once a week or not at all, certainly. So regular, intense exercise and eating healthy, eliminating the simple sugars and simple carbohydrates, eating more of a Mediterranean style diet that introduces and is founded on a plant-based diet with lean proteins, lean animal meats, and particularly an emphasis on seafood. On the oil side, coconut oil and olive oil are really, and avocado oil are the only three oils that I ever use. Get rid of the vegetable oils and the soybean oils and the canola oils and the fried foods. So, my psychiatrist friend at the NIH, he says, junk food equals junk brain. I take a more positive approach and I say healthy food will give you, equals a healthy brain.
That's great. All right, Doctor, I always end the show with 6 questions to help my listeners understand the why within my phenomenal guests. Will you run through these 6 quick questions with me?
Sure.
All right. As you've spent more than 30 years in the military and now are invested in helping people develop and sustain brain health, then as you reflect on this, what are you thankful for today? First was who you're thankful for, and then next is what you're thankful for.
Well, I'm thankful for, just the opportunity to be able to have put these concepts into perspective, and to be able to try to reach out to the general public and try to change how medicine's practiced, or at least approached. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity that God's given me to be able to put this lesson together. It's really given me a tremendous purpose in life. It's given me the opportunity to really, hopefully change medicine and change the world.
And then how do you fuel the fire within you? What gets you up every day, motivated?
Well, what really gets me up is knowing that I am making a difference out there, and that makes all the difference in the world. If you're not making a difference, one of my favorite quotes is by my childhood baseball hero, Roberto Clemente, is, if you're not making a difference in the world, then you're wasting your time.
Awesome. And when it comes to adversity, what's one thing adversity has taught you to value?
Perseverance. I mean, when the chips are down and people don't want to do what you think they should be doing, you got to have perseverance. I mean, I'm still, as much as I like to feel I have success with omega-3s, and I think, with the NCAA, it's a huge, huge win. But the military hasn't ever really grasped the importance of this, and it's frustrating to me, because I've got some of my close friends, even roommates, are at the very, very top of the Army now, and 4-star generals, and yet I can't get the military as an institution to embrace this concept. It's been slow and frustrating, but you know what? If you don't have perseverance, if you give up too easily, you're not going to get anywhere.
Right. Absolutely. And then what are you doing today you may have never thought you could?
I'm actually really excited. In a couple weeks, I'm going to be heading to a conference, the annual conference of the International Brain Injury Association, and giving a talk on all of this, the interaction of omega-3s and CBD and cannabinoids. And so to me, that represents starting to break into more mainstream medicine with something that most people would consider, an alternative medicine. But, I kind of laugh as like, when did nutrition become alternative?
Yeah, right. And then what will you do tomorrow that you may have never thought you could?
Well, I really think that the future in the next 5 years is going to be focused on CBD, particularly hemp CBD, and all its potential uses, and we need much more science and experience. And then I think beyond that, I think that the next area I'm going to start to explore after hemp CBD is going to be perhaps in the world of mushrooms.
Yeah, so there's exciting science coming out about psychedelics.
Well, nature gives us so many great ways to deal with these things. And I laugh about nutrition being alternative. Well, we talk about cannabis. Well, cannabis has been used for thousands of years by every major culture in the history of mankind, and yet we, view it in the last 100 years as being this evil thing. And I'm not a fan of marijuana at all. I think THC has a lot of issues. It's got some medicinal properties, but has a lot of issues that don't make it attractive to me. I think that the CBD side of things, the hemp-derived CBD, is really it's something that's been used for thousands of years, and I'm really excited to be a part of that tidal wave that's continuing to build.
Awesome. Thank you, Doctor. How can people learn more about you and your amazing work?
Number one, I can go on to Amazon, get the book When Brains Collide. Has lots of great information, what to do before something occurs, like we talked about prevention, and what to do if an accident or an injury does occur. Brain Health Education and Research Institute is the small nonprofit I started when I retired, and you can find lots of great information there at brainhealtheducation.org.